Well, the aim of this stream is to demonstrate seed starting. And today I am starting all of my alliums minus my leeks. My leeks I'm going to start a little bit later because as I was writing about a few weeks ago, I'm trying to avoid the leaf miner that seems to really like my leeks. I haven't had any issue with that with the onions and my shallots, and I kind of don't have an option in terms of delaying the planting of my onions, but so I have to start them anyway. But for my leeks, you know, they seem to be a lot more attractive to the leaf miner, so I'll be starting them later. Normally I would start them now, and that's what I did last year, but I'm trying a new strategy, see if I can just avoid the leaf miner in general for the leeks, because they really did destroy, I don't know, like 50% of my crop, my spring crop. So so I'm doing about, well, actually here, let me show you. I'll share my screen here. And I promise you, I did have this also set up before in the first stream, but that didn't work. Let's see, here we go. Okay, so here is how I figure out what I'm planting. I'll just show you all my onions, and we'll actually, this is the way I'll do it here. Filter by species. Okay. These are all of my leeks, shallots, onions, bunching onions, and garlic. We're not dealing with the leeks. We're not dealing with the bunching onion right now. Those all start directly in ground. But what I am starting, all of my onions and all of my shallots. So here, these are the numbers of what I'll be starting. So I did have an idea of doing somewhat of a trial. I have a little bit of the Calibra yellow onion seed left over from last year. I didn't buy any more because I'm more interested in seeing if other varieties perform better than the Calibra this time around. But I think what I'm going to do is at least do maybe a dozen of those using the old seed, just so I can compare the varieties this year. The reason why I'm looking for a new variety of yellow onion is because last year I had a pretty bad year where a lot of my yellow onions bolted, and partially that's my fault, but there are some varieties that are more resistant to bolting than others. And so I thought maybe it would be worth exploring if other varieties would be able to handle the less than ideal conditions that I can provide them in terms of the nursery, getting them out into the cold spring temperatures. You know, I can control the nursery as much as I can, but the onions really do love or would prefer cooler temperature, I think, inside than I realistically can provide. So at least the Calibras seem to go through a bit of a shock where they were in a bit of a warmer environment in the nursery. They got outside. We had a really cold spell. They might have gone partially dormant or not, ended with them bolting in large part. I'd say maybe 40 to 55% of the onions bolted. So that was really bad. So anyway, the point is that this time around, I'm probably going to, these are my yellow onions here, the amber and the Cortland. Those are the ones I'm going to be growing the majority of for this year for my yellow onion. But I think I'm going to start about a dozen of the Calibra to compare and see if the same thing happens with the Calibra, or if the amber or Cortland ones bolt as well, or if none of them bolt and it was just a sort of a conditional situational thing that happened last year. So, okay. Do. Yep. Okay, so sorry guys, give me just one moment. I'm very, very sorry. I am trying to see if there is no chat or if I'm not able to view the chat because I'm not on this other device. I'm not logged in. So let me just log in really quick and see if I can see it. Okay. Well, while I wait for that to come in, I'll continue. So over the last 2 or 3 years, I've also just been doing the same shallot, which is the innovator shallot here. So I'll be starting 64 of those. So in addition to, what is it? At least 100 of those. In total, I believe it is, here, I'll pull my calculator up. There's history. Okay, so I think it's about 225 in total. Alliums I'm starting today. I've already gotten the majority of the soil blocks pressed, so I won't have you suffer through me pressing hundreds of soil blocks. I do have a few left to do because I wanted to show you at least everything that I've learned about soil blocking, because it is really simple, but there's a bit like you can make mistakes that make it more difficult than it should be. So I'll just show you what I use and the tools that I like to use to make the soil blocks. Over time, I've developed a bit of a system which makes it as easy as possible, and it's something I can do inside. So I'm hoping that if you are interested in soil blocking, if you already soil block, that I can share with you some things to make your life easier, because, you know, the cell trays, those have a major plus because they are a lot less messy and they're a lot it's a lot quicker to do. But the soil blocks do have their benefits as well. They're much better for the plant roots. And they lead to a lot less transplant shock, in my opinion. So that's why I do them. But the cost is that the whole process is a bit laborious and kind of like actually backbreaking. And so the easier you can make it, the better. Definitely worth, definitely worth the investment in tools that make it easier, or in methods that make it easier, because man, when it's hard, it's really, really annoying. Personally, I don't enjoy it, but I enjoy it more than I would otherwise, because I have some methods that make it a little easier on me. So anyway, here are the shallots I do. They've never failed me. I've done them, I don't know, a couple of years now, I think. And I've actually had no problems with these. The only, I guess, minor issue I've had with them is that sometimes they'll split, which isn't terrible. But, you know, I really love a large, I don't know if you call them bulbs, like a large, uniform, smooth bulb, rather than something that kind of is split in the middle. It's a lot more clean and more beautiful. So that's like really the only minor issue I've had with my shallots. Great thing about shallots is if you like onions, but you don't have like a nice big area to start your onions in, shallots don't need that much space. They only need about 2 to 3 inches. So you can grow a ton of shallots in a much smaller space. when you compare them to onions, which makes them, in my opinion, a much more efficient crop than an onion. These are the 2 onion varieties I've decided on. We are in a long day area, so I can do intermediate or long day onion, but these ones have some disease resistance, and this is what I'm most interested in, is how well they store. I do enjoy the sort of more globe-like onions rather than the sort of UFO shaped onions. Anything that's really kind of this round shape I prefer. And the amber onion, I think this is the one that is one of the preferred onion varieties by people who do like market gardening or like farmers markets and stuff. Uniform tops, that's really helpful for when they're going to start to kind of flop over. Helps with knowing which onions are ripe or ready to be picked and cured, because some of the tops don't hold up the other tops. It makes it a little easier on the eye and a little bit easier to identify the ones that need to get pulled. Yeah. Also, let's see. Yeah, remain firm in long storage. That's another part. So, really, there's not. In my opinion, like as far as onion varieties go, you can get some minor amount of differences. Biggest differences that are going to be relevant to growing onions are disease resistance and long-term storage and like flavor pungency. In terms of the yellow onion, I haven't really noticed that big of a difference in like any onion I've ever eaten. But there are some that are marketed for such purposes, but I don't really make a distinction there. So anyway, that's what I'll be doing today. Last year I had some challenges with the onions, so this year I'm trying to do things slightly different. So last year I started my onions at least a week ago, like a week prior to when I'll be doing it now. And I transplanted them out a lot earlier than I'll be transplanting them out this year. So this year, my ideal transplant window is going to be end of March. Last year, I got them in, I think, about 2 weeks into March. Yeah, about 2 weeks into March. And I'm hoping that pushing the transplant date out later, as well as pushing the start date a little bit later, will eliminate some of the issue I had last year with the bolting. So, end of March is a little bit safer than mid-March in terms of like hard freeze. It's still possible, but I think it's a bit less likely. It's really early April that they'll be out. I mean, it's basically the end of March. So last year I also did, and this is some advice you hear a lot, is that you want to cut your onions, like trim them to about 2 inches. Now, this is what I noticed what happened last year is that I did that twice. And what I can say is it certainly seemed that after I trimmed the onions, it really did seem as though the necks got a lot stronger. They got a lot thicker. And another benefit of doing that is that I don't have the capacity to raise my lights up past a certain point. I can lift them up above the plant trays I'd say about a foot. So when the leaves are a foot long, they slam into the light, and that causes issues. It's way too hot. It's way too bright. So, and also they start to kind of like flop all over the place, and it becomes a mess. So trimming them helps in a lot of ways, including and most importantly, thickening the neck. But I noticed the second time I did it, that's when I started to have issues with the leaves dying back. That is not necessarily because I did the trimming. There's numerous reasons why that might have happened. Might have happened because maybe the scissors were not sharp enough. It could be because they were over fertilized, and it could be they were overwatered. I don't know. Something after I did the second trim, I really had an issue with the leaves yellowing and the leaves dying back. So this year, I think what I'm going to do is I will trim them once. And the bigger, more important part of the difference is that I'm going to only be using, I think I'm only going to be using compost tea instead of any sort of liquid or macronutrition. I think I'll only be using compost tea that's pretty heavily diluted, and I will be incorporating a lot of worm castings in there. So I'm hoping that I'll have less leaf tip yellowing and dieback because I'm cutting them only once. I'm fertilizing them less, and because they'll be less mature before I get them out. Because as soon as I got them transplanted last year, they really did just fine. They recovered just fine. Maybe the leaf that was cut and dying back, it just, it'll just fall off the plant and decompose, but the whole rest of the plant just instantly grew. So these are the kinds of things where when I'm talking about, like, last year I did a lot of experimenting and trying new stuff. This year it's really more about refining the techniques that I already have and figuring out, adjust a little bit here, change this. What does this plant actually need, like nutrition wise, while it's in the nursery versus outside? That I'm focused on this year in comparison. And then, what else was I going to say? All right. So, unless I remember what I was going to say, we can move to the nursery. So, cross your fingers. I think this is going to go fine because I've figured this part out. But I am going to put you guys on standby up here. I'm going to turn this camera off, and then I'm going to stream from my phone downstairs. So I just need to connect the streams together. So while I set that up, please feel free to drop in any questions in the chat. I can see the chat now. So if you would like to ask anything, any comments, please let me know. If you've grown any of these varieties of onions, I would love to know how they work for you. I think these are pretty common onions in terms of like organic varieties. But I would love to know if you've tried them. So let me just fiddle around here on my phone for one moment. Hey, imagine that it was landscape and you could see whiter. That's how it was. That's how I set it up. But I guess this program is not going to let me stream landscape from my phone. I'll have to work with that. I am trying to sort of figure out the pieces of technology I need to get this to work well. So this is a good experiment. Okay, so this is the nursery. I have, these plant shelves. I got these small plastic ones here. These are where the seeds germinate. So the reason why I use these rather than my shelves for that is because I have more humidity control, because I can zip the plastic up and I don't necessarily need like a humidity dome. Sometimes I use them. I use humidity domes because sometimes I run out of space on my nice shelves here. So I have to keep these open for my more like mature seedlings. And then I'll use the humidity domes for the germinating seeds. So it's a mix and match, but what I'll do is I have 4 square trays and 1 rectangular tray that I will be putting in. So I'll be using 5 shelves in these guys, and then I'll move them over to my post germination shelves after that. So what I wanted to do first was to demonstrate soil blocking. So if you've never heard of soil blocking before, or maybe maybe you've heard of it, you're a little less familiar with it than maybe a cell tray. Rather than using an item to create a medium for the soil to host the plant roots, what we're doing is we're compressing soil into a block. And then what the roots will do is they'll basically bind the soil together further after it's grown a bit. So I've already pressed these, and I used a stand-up soil blocker right here to do the majority of these, which looks like this. And it makes 12 1.7 something inch soil blocks, square soil or cubed soil cubes. But to finish it off, oftentimes I use this is a handheld one, and I'll sometimes finish it off like that. So I'm just going to finish this tray off using the handheld one. It's a little more convenient because, as you have already seen, I had a little bit of technical challenges, which makes us into better people, and I'll figure out how to do it. But I was having a hard time figuring out how I was going to show you how I do it on the ground because I'd have to tilt the camera down. But I use something like this, a bucket. It's really important when you're making soil blocks that you have something with a really hard, flat bottom that is able to come up against the hard part of this and really make a flat surface. Because when you're pressing the soil blocks, you press this into the soil, and you want to compress it into the blocker. You don't want to do it so much, but you want to do it enough to where the block sticks together. But at the bottom, you want to be able to kind of scrape off the rounded bits of soil here because you want your blocks to sit flat in the tray. If they're round, they do tend to topple over. So you want them as flat on the bottom as possible. Now, even with a tub like this, you still get a little bit of the rounding. But it's a lot easier to do with something like this, hard plastic, or even what I was using before was like a old wreath Tupperware, like a plastic square. For a long time, that really worked well because the bottom is perfectly level, but it did end up breaking. So this is a, what did they call these? It's used for, I think, like livestock feeding and watering and stuff. This has been great. Something with a higher lift is also good because you want to be able to mix it well. And this is already a messy process. So containing it as much as possible makes it easier to not get, and you don't want to waste soil mix, but you just don't want it to get everywhere. So anyway, I use stuff like this. And when I'm using the ground one, I'll put it on the ground. I have a very large square plastic flat. It's maybe as big as the stable. And I'll put that on top of it in my tray down there. It has the spring handle here that ejects the blocks. And like that. That'll press the blocks out. So, I eject the blocks into the trays. And it works like that. This is a small version of the exact same thing. And the pro of the stand-up one is that you get 12. This only makes 4. But I don't always use the stand-up one because I mean, while it makes more blocks, it's a little bit more finicky to use because with this, at least what I can do is I can make sure, every block is level. It's a little bit easier to work with. I can work not hunched over. But with that, I have to bend over and make sure all of the blocks are even and stuff before I do it. So, for large quantities of blocks like this, it's helpful. But in the smaller quantities, I like to do them all by hand using the hand one. So, in terms of like how to do a soil block, it's really easy, but you can kind of mess it up. So the first thing you want to do is you have to pre-moisten the seed starting mix, and it needs to get to a pretty precise level of hydration. So you want it, like, for instance, this is too, in my opinion, too dry because I have to squeeze it really, really hard to get like only a couple of drops of water out of it. And this will make a block, but the block will be crumbly. So when you eject it from the blocker, a lot of times it'll fall apart. So if you're working with the blocks and you're having a hard time like getting them to stick together, it's very frustrating, trust me. You can just know that if you just add a little bit more water, it'll probably end up sticking together a little bit better. So what we'll do before we start pressing is we'll just add a little bit more water to this mix. What I really like to see in terms of the moisture is for it to be, like, I like to see several drops of water kind of like this is probably really good. Like it should be able to, you should be able to get a bit of water coming out when you press it really hard in your hands. Not a lot, like you don't want it to be soaking. You want it to be very moist and not like soaking wet. You don't want it to be soggy. So like I can compress it into a little lump here, but then I can crumble it apart. If it's muddy or sort of soggy, that's a little bit too wet. So oh, let's see, David. We're just looking at your comment now. Sorry, I missed that. I have not tried the copra onion, but if you say it's a good one, I'll definitely look into it. But okay, so let's get to blocking these. Okay, so with a soil block, this is how I like to do it. So I'll press it in and try to fill the block as much as possible. Okay, and then this is my little handy trick. Is I'll press on this a little bit to kind of compress it in there, and then I'll kind of fluff up the soil a little bit, and then make sure to fill it kind of to the brim, because you really want to get a solid block. You really want to fill the blocker up in all the cells. You want to fill the cells up a lot, and then compress it a bit. So I'll use the handle to kind of compress what's already in there a little bit, and then see if I can fit any more soil in there by pressing it more. And so should look like this. It's very firm, but it is a bit rounded here. So what I use is a bench knife to make a nice even surface here on the bottom. And then I'll kind of smooth it over with my hand like that. Sometimes when I do this, sometimes the bench scraper will knock a chunk out because you have stuff in there that it clumps together a little bit more, like fibers or whatever. And so you can just take some more wet seed starting mix and just kind of press it back in there. And this is the nice thing about doing it with the handheld one, is because you can really make sure that every block is nice and perfect. As with the bigger one, as you can imagine, when you fill the whole thing with moist seed starting mix, it's very heavy. So like it's hard to like pick it up and then look at it. What I do is I just like rest it on the side of this and look at the side, and then I'll use the bench scraper to scrape it off and whatever. And I have to crouch down, and um, after 200 cells, it's a bit of a workout in your back kind of. So great thing about the hand when it goes a little bit slower, but you can be a little bit more precise and detail oriented. So once you got your blocks, you want to orient them where you want them, and then put a little bit of downward pressure on as you eject the blocks. Just pinch this upward a little bit. And then I like to do a little bit of this to make sure that if there's any soil sort of attached to the top, that it comes off. And in some cases, it doesn't come off all the way. So you can just set it on there again, give it a little jiggle. Sometimes it'll come out. So it came out that time. And if that happens, you can just tap the top and there you go. You're perfect. And now if it was a little bit more extreme in terms of crumbling like that, I might add a little bit of water, but in this case, it's good enough that if I added more water and I overshot it a little bit, it'd be a little too wet. So I want to make sure that I don't add too much water. So I think I can continue working with this. So I'll continue here. Like I was saying, people like to use cell blocks because there isn't plastic that is creating a barrier on the on the roots. So the roots can traverse through the seed starting medium, and when they reach an end point, say on this side, there's only air, the roots will just stop themselves rather than spiraling and girdling themselves, and then that's how you end up with a root bound plant, which makes, in my opinion, the plant a little bit easier to transplant because there's not less transplant shock. As far as I can tell, people have mixed opinions, and there's definitely no way. There's no right way to do any of this. It's just the way I do it, and it has been working for me. So, also for soil blockers, you can really get them in a huge variety of sizes. This one, for my onions, I like to do them in the largest soil blocker I have, which is just a little less than 2 inches, because they'll never see the inside of a pot. They'll go straight out of the soil block into the soil, and they'll spend quite a bit of time in the nursery. So I want to give them as much room to grow roots as possible before starting them, so that hopefully they don't have leaf dieback and yellowing. So bigger soil block just means more time that you have for the plants to sit in that block. For stuff that I know I'm gonna pot up, like tomatoes, onions, tomatoes and peppers, eggplants, sun lettuces like icebergs and stuff, I'll start those in the tiny, tiny blocks and then just pot them up. And that makes it more efficient because I don't have to press as many blocks. Because I have one that does, I think it's 35 1-inch blocks at once. And that'll fill an entire 10-20 tray with 3 presses. And I really don't start that many peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants and stuff like that. So I can start the majority of that stuff in just one tray. Depends what it is. But. All right. So after this one, we'll be done with soil blocking. There you go. Okay, and then once you've pressed all of your blocks, I'm gonna keep the extra moist seed starting mix around because you'll want to cover the seeds that you put in the dimples if you use dimples. And it makes it really handy to just kind of like just as I'm done with that. And the reason why I'm wearing gloves is because I don't have a sink in here and I have to travel a far distance to wash my hands. And wearing gloves just makes it a lot easier because I have to handle the seeds and I want to make sure they don't stick to my hand and get lost, especially with the allium seeds that are black. All right, so this does look partially filled, right? I've got a bit of a gap on this side, but I leave that there on purpose because when you're transplanting them, you need somewhere to start in terms of getting to the blocks and lifting them up and getting them out of the tray. So if they're all wedged up against the edge here, it makes like getting the first ones out really difficult. Oftentimes that is kind of like a sacrifice because the block gets totally destroyed. So if you want to keep the block intact, it's nice to leave just a little gap here so that you have a place to kind of really get under the block and lift them out. Okay. So we'll start here with onions. My hammer and my onions here. I can't forget to get my calibra onions as well. And I did print out my seed starting schedule as well as the number. So that's what I'm looking at right here. So I need to start 50 of each yellow onion. So it'll be two square trays of yellow onion. About the same of my red onions. Then I'll have most of the shallots left in here. This will be mostly shallots. See, the problem is I put a range for my yellow onions. I said 32 to 50 when each one of these trays holds 48. And I have 4 of them. So we'll do at least one full tray of each. That'll get us most of the way to 50. I'll save a little bit for my calibras. And we'll do, thinking about 64 shallots. So it'd be a whole square tray and about a half of this one, or maybe a square tray in this one, and then I'll save the other square tray for, I am going to start a bit of rosemary as well, and then I might do half and half of the rest of it for the others. So another thing I also, with my onions, the first year I did onions from seed, I did at least double sow every block, which I no longer do. I single sow every block because unlike something like a tomato or a pepper, onions don't really, you can't really like snip the onion at its root or at the soil line and like it will just die like you can for a tomato. So like for instance, for all of my tomato blocks, I'll double sow those. The first year I did onions, like I said, at least double sowed. Some of them I put 3 seeds in the block, and that was a mistake because I ended up having double or triple sowed onions, and even though I did snip them at the soil line, I had double or triple sowed onions in my raised beds. And it's certainly the case that when you double sow them, they're a bit smaller. When they're triple sown, they're the onions turn out to be much smaller. You can really get away with double sowing them. They'll be a slightly smaller, but I mean, if you're short on space, double sowing might be the way to go, to be honest. But I wanted real big onions, So I noticed when I did that, not every single one of them was double sown. Some of them only one seed germinated, so I had some singly sown or some singly germinated ones that got transplanted as singles. And I noticed those pretty consistently got much bigger than my doubly or triply sown ones. So from then on, I've only ever singly sowed my onions, and it's worked out very well for me. And in terms of volume, I think typically every year my allium starting day is usually the biggest day. I'll typically sow the most seeds on this day. Last year I did far more because I also did the leeks at the same time. And this year I'm kind of making up the difference with the yellow onions because we really, really, really want a lot of yellow onions this year, and we want at least the same number of red onions. So it's making up pretty much the difference there. So I'll show you how to top these off. It's really simple. And make sure I don't forget which ones are which. Just attach a little plant label here. So that when I transplant them, I can just stick that in the bed too. So those were my Portlands. I'm gonna grab some more gloves so I can cover these. And I'll tell you what, it sure is nice not doing this alone. It is a bit of a process, it took me about an hour to press all the blocks, and then it'll usually take a couple of hours to finish the seed sowing. So it is nice to have you guys along. I share, I'm just a person that does this, and I certainly don't claim to know more than anybody else about any of this. I would love to show what works for me, because it might help somebody else. And at least I know that on places like Substack, there's a ton of different perspectives on the same idea, which is really good because what doesn't work for you might work for somebody else. At least I know I've tried a lot of different things, and I've noticed that some people will really have success with things that just don't work for me. So, and I honestly, I don't see a lot of people doing soil blocking. A lot of people will use cell trays, which is perfectly fine. Like I said, there's a ton of benefits to doing the cell trays versus the soil blocks. And it's not as though I don't use cell trays either. I just don't use like the small cell trays. I'll just sow seeds into smaller pots, like 2-inch or 4-inch pots. For example, you can't start like a cucumber or a pumpkin in a soil block. It's just way too big. So you got to start it in something larger. And that's like, there are 4x4-inch blocks that you can get. There's like a stand-up one that's a single block. I don't know if they have a handheld one that's a single block, but like, I know they exist. I mean, at that point, I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot of. Might be worth doing actually. I've just never done it, so maybe it's worth doing. But to be completely honest, like there aren't a lot of things that I need to start inside that would need 4 inches of growing medium before I can get it outside anyway. So for instance, what could be done is instead of me starting my peppers and onions in smaller blocks and then potting them into pots, like 4-inch or 6-inch pots, I could just start them in the 4-inch blocks instead. I don't know. See, the reason why I do the pots is because it's certainly a lot easier to fill pots with soil and instead of pressing. I mean, I don't know what it would be. It'd probably be at least 40 4-inch blocks. It just seems like a lot of work to me. Might not be. And I know some of you may be thinking, why would you start a tomato or like a pepper in a block just to put it in a pot? To be honest, the answer is just because I already do the blocks. So like it's just working for me with everything else. And so like for instance, when I start my tomatoes in blocks, I'm already making the blocks for things like the lettuces and stuff and radicchios and stuff that'll go out in 4 weeks that doesn't need to get potted up at all. So I'm already making the blocks. Might as well start the tomatoes in the blocks too, rather than doing just the blocks for the radicchios and then starting the tomatoes in cell trays. And I don't know, it's just working. So like, why change it if it's working really well for me so far? Okay, so now that we've got our seeds covered here, it's hard. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but I just put enough soil so that the dimples are filled. And you can buy different dimples with different depths. But these ones, I know they're a 1/4 inch deep, every dimple. So for onions, that's a good depth. But for things like mint or lavender, or I think like lettuce, things that need something more like 1/8 of an inch of depth. You can buy different nipples, but what I'll do is I'll just kind of, either I won't fill the dimple as much, or I'll kind of push a little bit of dirt into the dimple so it's not as deep. Because you do have to, if you want to change the dimples, which are, show you what those are. These things that they're at the bottom, right? You can take these out and replace them with different ones. But I think they're shipped and made and sent with 1/4 inch ones because that's probably the most common seed depth. So it works for more people than it doesn't work for. Um, so the only problem is like because it's probably the more common seed planting depth, like changing them out would be kind of a pain in the butt. So I just don't do it. I'll just find other ways to get to the right depth instead of replacing the nipples, especially on the one that's got 35. Uh, I'm just simply not, it maybe it was better, but I'm just simply not going to. I'm not going to replace all of them. So, rather be realistic. Okay, so I'm gonna do one more tray, and then I'll turn the lights on and kind of go over the nursery setup here and kind of lights I use and this my setup. Like I've got timers and stuff, so I'll finish one more of these square trays and then set that up for you guys. And then I'd love to answer any questions. If anybody has any questions or has any different experiences or anything to share, I'd love to hear it. But in terms of what I wanted to show you, we've gotten to the majority of it here. Let's see. I don't know if anybody has, it could just be me, but those little like the cedars that have the dial and you can choose this whole size to like let the seeds out at a certain rate or whatever. I don't know about you, but maybe I'm using it wrong, but I just cannot seem to get this to work for me well. So I just do it by hand. If there was a way to do it better or more efficiently, I would. But doing it this way allows me to know that a single seed's coming out. And when you're working with stuff like onion seeds or uh, basil or what else has a black seed? Lettuce seeds are hard to see. If you're working with black seeds, when you drop them into something like this, it's really hard to see how many are in there. And if you're, if it's important to only get 1 or 2 or 3 seeds into a block, being able to feel the seed drop out of your hand is advantageous. So I just do it by hand, old fashioned. Um, Let me also share the so some people might be familiar with the whole seed starter trial saga that happened last year and or really last winter. So I have a little bit of a story to tell about that I did not talk about last year because I didn't want to make a fuss and come across as like a Karen or whatever. But as you know, I did the seed starter trial, and there was a clear winner in terms of seedling vigor, germination, and all that. And that was Fort V by Vermont Compost Company. Did the best. And Coast of Maine, there was the Sprout Island Blend Organic and Natural Seed Starter Mix. That came in second place, and that is currently what I'm using. And the reason why I'm not using the Fort V is because I have not found a distributor of that product that has been able to keep it fungus gnat free. So during the trial, I really, really fell in love with the product, was extremely happy with the product, obviously. So I bought a few bags to do my seed starting for springtime. And then I started having a fungus gnat issue and did not figure it out. And so upon further investigation, I found that the source of the fungus gnats was the Fort B. So I contacted the distributor and just let him know, like, hey, this is what's going on. I'm not exactly sure. Like, I'm just letting you know, like, I have to throw your product out because I'm not able to use it because it's contaminated. And I also let Vermont Compost Company know that a distributor of theirs was distributing a product that was contaminated and it may not look good for them, just so that they could be aware. And they let me know that the specific bags I got were years old and they had been sitting in a gardener distributor warehouse for quite a while, and that's probably why there was such a very, very strong population of fungus gnats in the compost. And compost compared to something like like a Miracle Grow or whatever is going to attract a lot more fungus gnats because it has a lot more organic material in it, and it makes sense. And I'm not blaming anyone. That's why I haven't been using 4Bs, because I just can't find a good distributor that will send me something that's not contaminated. So Coast and Main stuff has been working really well. I have not had a single issue with it. So, but I am really, really paranoid now in terms of every time I get a bag of seed starter or potting mix in, I'll open it outside and then I'll look in the bag to see if there are any signs of fungus gnats before I bring it inside. And then right here I have my container that I will keep it in, which is an airtight container, so that if there is an issue, they can't get out and contaminate anything else when I bring it in to dig it for seed starting like this. Put it in a bucket like that. So if I could find if I could buy the 4B directly from Vermont Compost Company in smaller quantities, because they will ship bulk, but if I could buy it in smaller quantities, I would use that instead of the main stuff. But this works just fine. I will say that for soil blocking, it is very well known to block very well, which is part of the reason why I liked it a lot. This is a bit fluffier, which is good. It just makes it a little more challenging to block it well. Um, but it doesn't make it impossible. So it works just fine. Now, what I will expect with my alliums is that, at least what I've noticed, is that uh, I won't get germination probably for at least a week, usually 2 weeks or more. Uh, at least that's what I've seen over the last couple of years. And it can be a little bit panic inducing when it's been a couple weeks and they haven't germinated yet. But um, they are slower than other things like lettuces or I think that the most rapid germination, I'd say brassicas are really fast. And what else? Brassicas, super fast. Lettuces are kind of fast. And then in terms of the slowest ones, definitely any patience varieties like carrots, parsley, dill, 'cause oftentimes takes a while. And that can really be stressful. And leeks really do, I think, at least from what I've experienced, the leeks take even longer than any onions to come up. But they will, like, sometimes they'll sit in there for a month and not come up for a month, and then they'll finally pop up. So, okay, so these are my ambers. And I do use Gorilla Tape for this because everything else, I bottom water, so I'll stick these in my big tray that's about the size of this table, and then and bottom water with that. So like if I stuck it using masking tape or something like that, it just falls off. So the Gorilla Tape really sticks on there, and you can get it wet. It's fine. Okay, so before I get these lights on, um, I will just give it a good spray, just to make sure that there's enough moisture, and also to sort of marry the cap with the block. Helps to spray it a little bit, because I won't be watering these probably until a week or so after they germinate. They won't need water. Just want to make sure they have enough moisture to facilitate germination with a good spray. Okay, so I think you're close enough to see well. These are little leaky like greenhouses I got off Amazon, but I've had them for 3 years, and I don't know if I would ever replace them because they just work so well for what I have set up. So I have these these Bipar LED lights that are dimmable. So, and they're LED. They do give off some heat. So that's what makes the ability to open this up really important. Um, and why I don't typically ever keep them closed after germination, because it simply gets too hot in there. But these are great because I don't need a heat mat for germination, because the heat from the light is enough to warm up the soil enough for germination. And the dimmable aspect of it is really, really good too, because as the plant grows, I can give it more light because it's more able to handle it, has more leaf surface and more chlorophyll. And also it helps with hardening, because when I turn it all the way up, it's still not as bright as the sun. So, but it's